the presentation?
All good. We all
Awesome.
can see it.
Thank you. Cool. I'll just get straight into it. So innovation is just creativity applied with technology. And this sentiment is as important in cyber as it'll ever be, because the nature of any kind of security is that malicious actors will always be trying to find more and more innovative ways of breaking through defenses put in place by the good guys. But it's security's job to come up with creative ways of patching any vulnerabilities that could be breached. But the problem is the defenders need to protect against hundreds, thousands, or more flaws in their defenses, whereas attackers may only need to successfully hit one. G'day everybody, I wanted to say thank you Malka very much for inviting me to speak here. My name's Josh, I'm the National Australian Lead for IoT and Digital Twins at Modus, and a Senior Technical Solutions Architect in my day-to-day life. I also really need to get a better professional shot done, because when enlarged like that you can see exactly how much that hairstyle didn't suit me, but haven't had the opportunity since. In case you want to follow me on Twitter, I'll connect in LinkedIn. Those are my ads. You may get 1 or 2 retweets every few months on Twitter, but I'm trying to be better. The irony is that despite working on real-time systems or near real-time systems, I'm really incompetent at social media, real-time social media. It can take days to respond to messages, if at all. Malcolm found that. But I'm here today to talk to you about the Internet of Things and how much power it brings to productivity, but also how much raw destructive power it yields when not adequately secured. I'll start out by talking about the productive power of IoT, but then get into why it's critical that cybersecurity be utilized, as well as briefly touch on ways of securing IoT devices. I'll then go a little bit into my own academic and work history to provide some anecdotes and context, and then give you some advice on how you can stand out from others in your field when job hunting. The Internet of Things brings enormous opportunities that sometimes people outside the industries may not register. It's funny reading a lot of misguided comments about the Internet of Things made by people who maybe just don't understand that IoT is much more than a smart coffee machine. I'd like everyone to quickly make a bet with yourself to see if you can guess this next question correctly. Make a bet like, if you bet it right, you can get HJs on the way home, but if you get it wrong, you can't skip leg day this week. I want everyone to think to yourself and lock in a number in your mind that you think represents the percentage market share that consumer IoT has versus the overall IoT market. Think about all the smart devices around: routers, home automation, security, virtual assistants, wearables and fitness trackers, smart TVs. I mean, when I was writing this in my office, looking around, if I don't include my IoT development kits, where I have hundreds of sensors boards and edge compute devices, etc., I have 9 IoT devices in production in my office. A smart room light, 3 smart lighting peripherals, 2 smartwatches, activity tracker, a Nest Hub screen, and a Nest mesh point. So what percentage of IoT devices in the current market do you think are consumer versus the remainder, which could be considered industrial IoT? Well, the answer to that is depending on the source, but it sits around 55% of consumer, 45% of enterprise. And I want everyone to remember this next number for a bit later. That 45% of IoT devices that's not consumer facing, that's about 7 billion connected devices at the moment, 7 billion. So what are all those devices doing? Well, IoT is being used actively to improve the standard of life and help stop unnecessary deaths all around the world. In agriculture, it's helping farmers grow the same yield, but with 40% less water and fertilizer. I'm not even going to go into smart farms, hydroponics, vertical farms, all enabled by the Internet of Things. Biometric devices are being used for detection in healthcare, for everything from breast cancer through a smart bra to non-invasive biometric monitoring and fall detection in aged homes. The IoT is being used by governments and councils all around the world to get a deep understanding of pollution in air and water to try and minimize 9 million deaths seen a year. And of course, IoT is used in industry, manufacturing, mining companies all around the world to optimize maintenance and production, and in the process saving them or making them additional tens of millions a year. So on those figures, here are some of the staggering numbers surrounding IoT, specifically in Australia. These figures are taken from a paper published by the Australian Computing Society, and they demonstrate some of the insane benefits on the Australian economy and Australian industry. IoT has a potential impact of just under 200 billion to just over 300 billion in the next 8 to 18 years in Australia alone. It's pretty insane. But while the Internet of Things is productively powerful, it is also destructively powerful. In security, we've always been concerned with helping our system, concerned about having our systems breached. But how much more destructive power can a breached system have if it's attached to your heart, or if it's controlling a car full of your friends and family? It's a pretty horrifying thought, but those are both real-world examples. 465,000 pacemakers were found to be vulnerable to exploitation, where malicious actors could actually control the pacemaker, change the pace, make it rapidly discharge its power to go flat, or even administering shocks to the person's heart. Several Jeep models were demonstrated to be remotely hackable and controllable, including steering and braking the cars. And a casino had 10 gigabytes of data, including high roller data, exfiltrated after the networks were breached via the fish tank thermometer. Then, of course, there's the Miri botnet, a botnet comprised of smart devices that in 2016 was used to launch the largest DDoS attack in history to that point. This IoT botnet denied service to Spotify, Reddit, and Twitter, and at its peak was hammering DIN with 1.2 terabytes of data per second. Even now, 5 years later, it remains the fourth largest DDoS attack in history when you're looking at the peak bit rates. That is some pretty awesome destructive power. So how do we go from small microcontrollers sitting inside, Jeremy's smart toaster to a DDoS with a 1.2 terabyte of data per second? Well, there are insecure IoT devices that are used to widen the attack surface that malicious actors can use to infiltrate and exploit. It just takes one insecure device with an internet-facing connection for a hacker to get into that network. And then once in, how secure are the rest of the devices who haven't been hardened to account for that kind of attack? Insecure IoT devices can be used to, as we mentioned, access hardened networks. An example of this was that casino hack where the fish tank thermometer was used. But there's also the data to consider. Thanks to smart devices, a hacker can gain access to thousands of additional data points that were never available in the past. And it doesn't even need to be a hacker, because sometimes companies will do the hard work for them. Strava released activity tracking information gathered from fitness trackers and smartphones that allowed the public to see detailed routes traveled all around the world, including detailed foot traffic paths of forward military operating bases in the Middle East. Oops. So how can you secure against becoming one of the botnet, or widening your attack surface, or providing a ridiculous number of data points? At an overarching level, it's not actually that difficult, and it follows many of the security principles we've known about for some time. That's why I wanted everyone to think back to that figure that we mentioned before, that 7 billion enterprise IoT devices and around 8 billion consumer. When was the last time that we heard about an IoT breach for mining sensors, or hospital IoT devices, or office environment systems? These are all IoT systems too, but the vast majority of breaches are consumer devices. And I think this is a little to do with standards and compliance requirements. Industrial IoT engineering vendors have to harden their devices significantly more than consumer do. But there's also a little bit of negligence by us consumers. We get a shiny new toy and set it up and start using it, but we forget to apply our security best practices. So what are some of those ways that we can secure IoT devices? Firstly, abiding by the Australian Signals Directory, top 4 techniques, abide by password best practices, and abide by device securing best practices. The ASD top 4 are essential techniques to protecting a system, and together provide great coverage for hacker intrusion, propagation through the system, and data exfiltration. The top 4 are comprised of only allow whitelisted applications to run, because if your hacker can't execute any of their own scripts or programs, things get a lot harder for them. Keep your applications patched, as well as keep your operating systems patched. Don't let either of them reach end of life, because patches are useless to us if they're not installed, right? And restrict privilege execution to the absolute minimum. This is the principle of least privilege. As simple as they sound, these steps are resoundingly effective, but surely there's more that we can do. Well, we can start by changing the default username and password. That one's pretty effective. Don't share passwords across your devices. I get a little twitch thinking about all the deployments of devices that all use the same password. Keep them unique to the device. And cycle the passwords periodically. Most good device orchestration services come built in with automated key rotation. And then you also want to log and monitor access attempts, which will give you a pretty good understanding of infiltration attempts. So picture this scenario and how it plays out if you follow the tips mentioned so far. But let's assume that they've been pretty crafty and our logs and monitoring didn't flag anything. Somebody manages to access a device by guessing or cracking the password. They can't access any of the other devices because the passwords are all unique. They don't have permissions to execute any scripts, and known vulnerabilities are patched, so they can't exploit other applications running on the device to gain privilege execution. And they don't have permissions inherently to do anything like change the password because they don't have those escalated privileges. So 2 weeks after they breach it and can't do anything, they get locked out again when the key is rotated. Then we go a step further. Network segregation is not only a great normal practice to adopt, but it can be a saving grace mitigation technique when you have a dependency on some particular devices that just may have vulnerabilities yet to be patched. Imagine you're developing a solution to monitor water quality of a dam 300 kilometers away from the closest town. The only mature offering on the market has a vulnerability not yet patched, but by putting that sensor ecosystem in its own isolated network and assuming you've done the previous steps, any breaches only result in the attacker getting a bunch of water metric packets and they can't propagate into more secure servers or systems, preventing scenarios such as that casino hack. The next step is using device provisioning with default images. Think of that same water sensor. A hacker has managed to exploit the publicized vulnerability, and your machine logs are showing anomalous activities. You can just use your device provisioning service to flash the device back to its standard image. It'll clean off the malware because they were unable to gain privilege execution rights thanks to the steps you did with the ASD Type 4. And they couldn't install anything on the firmware or root level. Thus, doing a wipe will give you a clean slate and put them back to square one. And finally, disable unnecessary communication means and directions. If there's no reason for your devices to be able to talk to each other, explicitly disable the ability to do so. Close off any ports that have no value being open. And the great thing, you can see devices in production that the only way you can communicate with them is via a reverse SSH tunnel. You have to request that the tunnel be opened by the device, and that's the only way to communicate in. So that was very brief and very simple, but extremely effective ways of securing components of the Internet of Things. Now, I wanted to give you a little bit of a background on me and my student and work career, as well as some advice on how you can stand out from other students doing the exact same course as you. So as I mentioned before, I'm a senior architect and lead the IoT and digital twins capability at Modus for Australia. Here you can see the lovely color scheme changes to the Modus brand. I just wanted to spend a minute with a little humble brag about Modus because it's a pretty impressive company with some amazing people and some insane projects done all around the world. There's over 30,000 employees worldwide in over 20 countries. And Modus globally deals with everything from engineering itself to technology solutions and consulting, training through Modus Academy, innovation labs, project management, business consulting. Modus's ability is even recognized globally, and we are the official engineering partner of the Mercedes-Benz Formula E team. So Formula E for the electric vehicle motorsports. And I thought I'd play this quick video because it's pretty cool.
It's really pushing innovation, technology, and sustainability, and I see that platform is only becoming greater.
So I always thought that was pretty cool. It's going to play again. There we go. So a bit into my academic background. I did a bachelor in software engineering and then began to specialize in big data and IoT through a research thesis. I really enjoy problem solving, so I loved doing hackathons and programming competitions. I participated in 7 hackathons. 5 of them were competitive, and in 4 of those 5, I either won or received a commendation award. After winning one of those hackathons, I was actually offered my first graduate position by a company that hosted it. The funny thing is that company that hired me never asked to see my academic transcript, which was a slight bummer because I'd worked really hard in my honours coursework. And don't at me about that intrusion detection. I still feel hard done by for that one. But it was the hackathons that I was competing in that got me noticed, and also where I started to specialize in the fields that I love, emerging tech and IoT. So I accepted that job, and I was still finishing uni at that point, focusing on my thesis on big data, much of which is generated by IoT devices. My thesis itself was called Handling the Accelerating Generation of Big Data for Enhanced Data Analytics with Gradual ETL, or Hansel and Gretel for short. I kept focusing on IoT and emerging tech, and my colleagues and I helped co-author the world's first paper that encapsulated the technology, strategy, and commercial aspects of Australia's IoT market, which was actually that paper that I referenced earlier. This ACS paper is called Australia's IoT Opportunity Driving Future Growth. And here are some of the IoT projects I've worked on throughout my career: office environment temperature digital twin, hospital patient spatial tracking system, real-time biometric streaming, real-time fall detection before Apple did it, remote worker stress and heart rate anomaly detection, computer vision for people with disabilities in remote areas, mining maintenance worker safety through IIoT, and my current project for Woodside, which is a secret at the moment, but I'm sure you'll hear about it soon enough. Alrighty, so how can you stand out from other students who are doing the exact same course as you, given that you'll all have relatively the same technology experience? Well, extracurricular is key, because imagine being a hirer reading through all the resumes for a grad position. Every single applicant will list the same things, which is the things that they learn at uni. They may have 1 or 2 semesters of a technology that differs from other students for a capstone project or similar, but for the most part, all students come with the same foundation. And this is for a really good reason, but it means that the burden is on you to differentiate yourself. Because if you've done a side project, internship, or been in any competitions, especially if you've won, you'll stand out. So what are some of those things that will make you stand out or help you get that gig? The big 3 that I would recommend are networking, projects, and competitions. Networking is a big one. The chances are you already have one. You know, it's your mates, your fellow students, colleagues at work, the tutors and lecturers. Make sure to stay connected with these people. You should try to use network opportunities to make more connections, which can even turn into friendships with other people in your field or fields that you're interested in. And this can be for a number of reasons. The first of which is keeping in contact with people that you've met can be great if they hear about a vacancy from their network that matches your description. I've probably done this about a dozen times so far, hearing from a mate or a contact in my network that's hiring a specific skill set that I remember somebody talking to me earlier who was looking for a job has. Networks are also fantastic for referrals. A big part of going for a job is having somebody willing to vouch for you and your skills. And unfortunately, but realistically, do you think companies hiring a cybersecurity specialist would prefer a candidate with a referral from a senior security analyst from Tesla or one with a reference from a Baker's Delight shop staff? But how can you build your network? You already have your current connections, but you can meet more people by going to industry meet and greet nights hosted with the university, going to specialist skill meetups like cloud meetups or security meetups, competitions, which I'll go into, or even through a workplace if you're in an internship or already in a role. But make sure that you keep that connection with these people through LinkedIn and have a good LinkedIn. It is an incredibly handy tool to help your career. People like Bill Gates, Elon Musk, Steve Wozniak, Satya Nadella, they don't need crazy good LinkedIns because everyone knows who they are. But until you get to that point, you kind of need one. I would genuinely be surprised if any of you knew who I was before when Malka announced me as a speaker. But when she announced it, if any of you were particularly curious, you could have Googled me. And depending on your Google profile, my LinkedIn would likely be one of the first results that you get when you search. And the information that you'll see there includes my current title with Modus, my work history with Google, the honors and awards I've won. These things paint a picture of all of your accomplishments and skills and help draw attention to your profile. I've had nearly 400 unique visits to my LinkedIn in the past 90 days. And after a quick search, apparently the rough average LinkedIn is about 222. So think about all the famous people on LinkedIn, like some of the aforementioned, and if I'm double the average unique page visits, it means there's some pretty poor profiles out there dragging their feet. The next one is big: have a professional looking picture. It's the same with many things. A name without a face is really difficult to build a connection with. When someone can see your face, you become more real. And I say professional looking because I know it's not realistic that everyone has professional photo shoot content available to them. My first LinkedIn photo was this banger, where I was looking at the camera, had a suit and tie on, and I'd done my hair. This was actually taken halfway through my 21st, and I'd had more than a few drinks, but it looks professional. Fill out every section with as much detail as possible, and a really good opportunity here is the courses section. Fill it out with your unit names, because marketers aren't the only ones that can utilize search engine optimization. Unit names are typically very descriptive and keyword heavy, so you'll hit a lot of search results. And make sure you add any projects you're working on with descriptions that also include keywords. Also use the social aspect of LinkedIn. Follow people who inspire you or in positions that you want to be in. Follow pages or companies that have content that interests you or that you want to work at. Connect with people that you meet to maintain that connection, and like and comment on people's pages and posts. One of my connections is a well-known role model in the marketing world, and he shared a post about his podcast's next guest speaker, another chief marketing officer, with some content that I thought would be interesting to someone in my network who's a talented up-and-coming marketer. So I tagged her in the content, not only giving her visibility to the post and its materials, but all the other marketers connected with that role model contact will likely see her tagged in that, which could lead to opportunities for her in the future, or her network, who will also see that she's been tagged. Now, side projects. They don't have to be side either. They could be your job, or you could do them by yourself, could be with your mates, your capstone, any project that you work on. These are a great way to enhance your skill with a technology or to learn new skills. If you hear about in-demand skills or roles and are looking to change roles or just looking for a job, start learning those skills and do it in a side project so you can add it to your resume. Some examples of in-demand roles at the moment in Melbourne are security developer, ethical hacker, or cyber consultant. There are 86 vacancies in Melbourne for a cyber consultant on Seek. Or on the skills side, skills relating to .NET development, with .NET being one of the best choices for microservices and serverless applications. It's hugely in demand at the moment. There are 257 jobs advertised on Seek in Melbourne right now for .NET. Competitions and hackathons, another fantastic way to quickly dive into a new technology, meet new connections, and potentially impress some people. Like I said, winning a hackathon held by a company was how I landed my first job. And the great thing was they saw what I could do in action, so they didn't need to put me through technical interviews, which was fantastic for me because I was always a nervous wreck during them. They just gave me 2 behavioral interviews to make sure I wasn't a dick, and they offered me a job. I admit I was fairly lucky because I had the skills that they needed, but that was because of my previous point. I had looked at in-demand skills at the time. I was working on side projects with those skills. And anyway, having a bunch of competition wins on your resume is a great way to impress companies because them looking at these candidates, it shows that their skill is objectively proven. It's also a great opportunity for networking and meeting like-minded people. Either other competitors or attendees or hosts, if they're at the same competition, they very well may have similar interests to you. Whoop, I went the wrong way. There we go. So that's all I had time to cram in, and my big 3 recommendations on how to get the gig. And that's my presentation. If you found these slides nice, the template was free to use. Obligatory slide credit slide. Thank you for your time and attention. I hope the lecture was valuable, at least in part, and special thanks to Malcolm for inviting me to give this presentation. Feel free to connect on Twitter or LinkedIn.